Hi, I am Chris Hurd, and you're listening to Ahead of the Herd, podcast where we talk about how to buy tech from people who are actually buying tech. And this week, I've got a really exciting guest. You may not have heard of him, but lots of people have, and I think he's awesome. His name's Howard Holton. He's COO, CTO, fill in this gap, I think, at Gigaom currently, and he's had multiple roles buying tech for all sorts of companies. So say hi, Howard.
Hey, Chris, and audience members. I've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this for more than 35 years now, and I think, I did some napkin math a couple of years ago, and I think I have eclipsed 5 billion in purchases in my career. So I've bought a bit.
Okay, what was your favorite decade to buy in?
The odds, by far, the odds. It's not even close.
Noughties. We call them the noughties in England, but
naughties. Yeah. Because IT was, it's accurate for IT, right? We were naughty at the time. We really, at that point, everyone knew they needed tech. The .com had happened. The .bomb crash had occurred. Everybody knew they needed to be online. Everybody knew they needed tech. Everybody knew the business was now about, these moving bits around, but nobody really knew what it was or how it's supposed to work or how to govern it, how to manage it. You know what I mean? And so we got away with murder.
Was it kind of okay? I don't know if murder.com was a big hit, but I get the picture.
It was, but they shortened it to hp.com. It was fine.
Hey, nice. All right. So are we kind of thinking about was the .com then? I was alive, but I wasn't buying tech. But was it kind of where we're at with crypto, where it's almost a bit of a Wild West? We don't really know what the internet is. There's very few guardrails on it.
Yeah, it was where we are with crypto, kind of where we are with AI. You know what I mean? Like the .com really was. There's the potential for massive economic growth here. There's potential for kind of world-changing wealth to be created. It was really about wealth creation more than anything else. And no one knew what they were doing, and no one knew kind of how to measure it and how to manage it. We were really good at measuring things in the physical world, right? All of a sudden, this thing comes along. It's completely digital. You can have $1 billion company that's 4 people in a garage and doesn't really make anything. Pets.com was one of the examples of that, right? Stamps.com was another one that kind of got hurt. Because it was also almost impossible to know if you had a flashy website and a good pitch deck. It's kind of impossible to know that you were less real or more real than the person that walked in with the pitch deck 5 minutes before that.
Okay, so it's very interesting. And I always think of it now because the internet's so established in my life that I think crypto is so wild and out there, and AI is so wild and out there. But I guess it is kind of the same. If you live through it. What about on the sort of enterprise side? What were some of the crazy risks? It sounds like a great time to be a salesperson as well as it sounds like it was a great time to sell products as well as being a buyer. So what were some of the craziest sort of wacky out there things from an enterprise side that you either actually bought or evaluated?
Well, so most of the crazy wild stuff at the time was on the kind of services side, right? Like standing in a data center, escorting a phone company representative who's removing an old router. And we didn't really everything was just kind of slapdash. So imagine a rack, right? Everything is stacked, but for some reason, somebody moved a router up one screw hole, not a screw hole, and then routed a cable through there.
Okay.
A power cable.
Yeah.
So you have a block kind of power cable end. On the other end is another block with a wire in between. And so the guy goes, cool, can I just, I can't get this out. Can I just cut it?
And of course,
before anybody can make sure, the guy the facilities guy who's also there was like, sure, go for it. Wait. And he'd cut it. Well, he didn't unplug the other end.
Okay.
So he brought down the PDU. And of course, at the time, they didn't have redundant PDUs in the routers. So everything was plugged into the same PDU. 50,000 users disconnected. And at the time, most of our users used VAX. And it's just another kind of Unix-ish operating system, a Unix operating system. High processing throughput competitor to AS400 would be the easiest way to kind of explain. But at the time, whether it's our system and the way it was created or a limitation of the VAX, I wasn't a deck guy. You had to manually reset each connection. So
Oh
when the
wow.
40,000 users got disconnected, they had to be manually reset. 50,000 users got disconnected, they had to be manually reset, which
This
didn't
is why.
didn't endear anyone to the VAX team,
Of course.
right? And it was that kind of stuff, $5,000 for a 500 megabyte hard drive, and we bought crazy shelfware, right? There was no Windows clustering available at the time, so we bought crazy Windows clustering software that was that was like there are people that make really delicate art out of ceramics that's like 1 millimeter thick and can't be handled by human hands or it collapses. And even they were going, come on, guys, that's a little too fragile.
That's a little brittle. That's
You know what I mean?
funny.
Like there are cooks that are really focused on on not letting their quiche fall or whatever it is fall, and even they're like, come on. I mean, I think you're pushing fragility to a little bit of a crappy level.
I
I
mean,
had a sysadmin get drunk at lunch. He got an alert on his phone for like the 15th time about the cluster software and just removed it in the middle of the day. Took the entire enterprise down and removed the cluster in the middle of the day just because, this is frustrating and I don't want to deal with it anymore. And the business just kind of went, well, that sucked, but all right.
Well, well, if it was happening to everybody, I mean, now I'm understanding why IT people can be so grumpy because they've been through that. So if you're selling tech to IT and you think they're being a bit over the top with due diligence, I think maybe this could be part of the reason why. What's the chances that person, that sysadmin, was at a lunch with a salesperson who was feeding them alcohol to get them drunk to make a mistake to then sell them some other
That's
clustering
totally
software?
reasonable. Yeah, it's totally reasonable.
It
It's
could have been.
totally like that would not be the only time that would have happened in my experience. Right. Like there's a reason no one should have signing authority within 2 hours of any meal.
That's
You know what I
really
mean?
good.
Like no executive should have signing authority between the hours of like 1 and 4 p.m. or like 5 to 7:30 or 5 to 9:30. Like like maybe there should be a writing test. You know
Or
what I mean?
during
Like
a conference as well.
before
Block
you
'em.
sign this, you have to match all of these letters. We're going to do a cursive test. That means you're sober enough to be able to sign your name. Like I'm not sure what the anti-fraud needs to be there, but yeah,
That's
it
brilliant.
was the wild west for sure. And really, like every day was a new product. It feels like the security space today, right? Every day there was a new product. Every day there was a must-have. Every day there was some new thing that was instantly sold through airline magazines. Like that's where that all came from, right? And so your CEO would come back, your CIO would come back, your CFO would come back, right? Remember, IT all reported to the CFO at this time. CFO would come back and go, "We need this thing tomorrow," and you'd go, "That doesn't remotely apply to our business. Who do you work for? Do you work for me? I think you work for me. I think you need to do this then."
You're just like, yep. When it goes wrong, it's your fault. Though it wasn't their fault when it went wrong. I'm sure.
Oh, sure. No, they took full responsibility each and every time. No, they never took responsibility. Like we were always host.
That is. So, have we learned anything? I mean, if that's what it was like in the noughties or the noughts, with AI today, are we doing the same thing?
Yeah, we're absolutely doing the same thing. We do the same thing every time, right? The FOMO is a fear of missing out, right? FOMO is a real human emotion, and we're not going to get over that in a year. We're not going to get over that in 10 years. We're not going to get over that in a century. And the pace at which we are exposed to new, thus the pace that we encounter FOMO, has done nothing but increase. It has not decreased, right? And this stuff is ridiculously complex.
And,
Right?
and yeah, that's a good point. Complexity is increasing too. By the way, I love that you explained FOMO but not VAX. Just for everyone, this is what FOMO means. But yeah,
Well, one of them is effectively dead. The other one's not dead. Like you know what I mean? Like,
this is true.
I'm not
Why
going to
do I need
explain how the horse and buggy system worked either. I'm just going to assume it doesn't matter because it's dead.
Fair enough. That's fair. All right. So we've So we haven't learned any lessons. We're doing exactly the same thing, and we have FOMO because there's more complexity. And I think complexity. You mentioned security earlier. We talk about AI a lot. People are pulling the trigger on AI a lot, and it moves really fast, and people are building stuff. But it feels to me like cybersecurity is moving equally as fast, if not faster. There's a necessity driving that. Obviously, the bad actors are becoming more and more advanced as well. But are we also taking risks in security? Security is not an area I've ever sold, and I don't have that much knowledge about it. But it just feels like I get FOMO from cybersecurity because it feels like one of those areas that is always innovating. There's always a new product to sell. It's always relatively easy to sell because there's an easy fear to sell against. So, do you feel like that's somewhere that people are skipping steps in due diligence as well on the security front?
So I want to start by saying security is one of only two things we participate in, whether we want to or not. Like, as a business, there are only two things you participate in, and you have no choice. The first is the currency system of whatever place you have you run business. I cannot control the value of the U.S. dollar, the buying power of the U.S. dollar, the exchange rate of the U.S. dollar. I am simply subjected to it. It's like weather, right? The second one is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a combat sport. If I decide not to field the team, I don't do anything with cybersecurity. The opposition is still there, and the opposition is still fully funded.
Yeah.
Right. So I can choose to participate in AI or not. I cannot choose to participate in cybersecurity or not. And it is fully 100% reactive. Right. There's no 0-day cybersecurity solution. There's a response to a 0-day flaw from a cybersecurity vendor, which is always not 0-day. As in, it's always sometime after the flaw was found, we created a fix. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so it's very much a combat sport, and there's nothing else in IT that's really a combat sport. And so I think it's important to kind of keep that in mind. While cybersecurity is changing, cybersecurity changes directly in relation to the flaws within the technology that we use. There is no other change. And the flaws are never going to not exist. I think that's another kind of important thing to consider for folks. There is no way to create a perfectly secure system. Yeah. Right? The joke is, if you want a perfectly secure computer system, you dig a hole in the earth, you dig another hole in that hole, you put the computer at the bottom of it, and then you cover it in concrete. You have an accessibility problem, but the data will be secure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So AI and everything else is a little bit different, but we definitely have a problem of kind of the tail wagging the dog entirely too frequently. Right. We have a problem of mixed messaging, and we definitely have a problem of like shoot, ready, aim.
Okay. Explain that. Dive in a little bit more what you mean by that.
So before we even figure out if we're ready for AI, we're buying AI. So we've shot. Okay. Then we go, okay, cool, we have AI. What do we do with it now? Well, I don't know. You told me to buy AI, so I bought AI. I don't even know what to do with it either. Now let's figure out maybe what we could do with it. So that's our ready. And then our aim is planning, right? So what we should do is understand what the kind of technology is and how it operates and what the benefits are that it could do within the context of reality, not what salespeople tell us and not what researchers tell us, because neither of those actually reflect reality. They reflect some depth of fantasy, right? A researcher is not focused on today. A researcher is focused on what is the potential of tomorrow. Right. And the more academic the researcher is, the further out tomorrow becomes. It's why when you get these really, really, really like storied and certified talking heads that have been in AI for 25 years, and you hear them speak, they're like, no, AI will end the world. Well, while that is a decent possibility, that's the ultimate culmination of research in a vacuum. Research in a vacuum says AI will end the world. Sure, but you have no controls placed on it. You have no rules placed on it. You have no concept of how bad people are going to screw it up when they actually encounter it. Right? And it's much more likely that it's going to be like Rick and Morty. Your purpose is to butter toast. Okay. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I haven't. Right? I'm sure other people have.
He creates this little like robot with highly advanced artificial intelligence whose job it is to butter toast because he finds the effort to butter toast is too much work. You should watch Rick and Morty.
Okay, I
And
should.
it causes an immense level of depression within this robot. It's very much like Marvin from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Sure. There you go.
I've got all the intelligence of the universe, and I'm really just good at opening doors.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's much more likely to happen when you give it to a human than Terminator. Like that's far less likely to happen. But that's what you're going to hear because, well, they're not attached to reality. And then salespeople don't, like, the goal of a salesperson isn't to understand something. It actually shouldn't be to understand something. I know that sounds antithetical.
Well, I don't know if I think they have to understand something. They just have to understand something different. Their job is to understand what the business need is and understand how they can impact that. They don't need to know specifically how that technology does that thing. They just need to know, okay, they need to trust in their business to know that it can.
Sure.
And
So there's a difference
what...
between I have to know the things necessary to do my job and I have to know something, right? Like, salespeople don't know how to solve problems. They know how to address objections about objections they've heard before. So salespeople, sorry.
No,
here's the problem. The problem is if salespeople understood something, they'd have the same nuanced problems that engineers have. You can't get a straight answer from an engineer because nothing is black and white when you understand the nuances, and engineers only want to respond in black and white.
Okay.
Right? And if salespeople understood what they were selling, they'd never make a sale. Because everything would be a nuance, and you'd be like, well, it doesn't really, okay, I understand what you're saying. It kind of does that, but not really, and your use case would then have to match. Okay, no, it's not going to work. Right?
Well, this is why we have the sales engineer, right? I think is the role
correct.
of the sales engineer is to be that sort of middle ground of really understanding it, but ability to communicate with other people.
Correct. Well, and speak engineer, right? So the salesperson goes, this is the problem that it solves. And then the customer engineer goes, we don't have that problem. And the sales engineer goes, actually you do, and this is what it looks like. And then the engineer goes, oh, you're right, we do have that problem, but we'd like it fixed this way. And the sales engineer is supposed to then go, you don't want to fix it that way. You think you want to fix it that way, but I promise we've done this 600 times. You actually want to fix it this way. That gets you to the destination that you want. Right? So, but the sales engineer also doesn't have the confidence to walk in the room and just go, yeah, this will solve all your problems. You need a salesperson for that. And then you need a sales engineer to go, actually, there was an asterisk on that sentence, so let's talk about what the asterisk means.
I mean, salespeople can put the con in confidence for sure from time to time. I love that. I don't have the confidence just to go in and say, yeah, it'll work. It'll be fine.
Yeah. I got you, bro. It's fine.
Yeah, it should be fine. All right. So now, how do we... Because this is interesting. I think this gets to the crux of this conversation about how you buy technology. Because what's interesting about that is the engineer on the other side doesn't know everything about this particular vertical either, right? So they know broadly about technology and then they know specifically about their business, but they don't know about this specific technology. The engineer on the vendor side knows specifically about this technology, but maybe doesn't know broadly about the business. And so it can be I feel like there's a power differential in that conversation where the team from the vendor side. So you've got the salesperson who's confident, who, if they're good, understands your business, can understand how to solve those problems and can talk to it. The sales engineer who can communicate in a more technical way, but still also salesy. And then the engineer who knows very much, like, deeply about this vertical. There's a lot more power on that side in knowledge of this specific purchase, right? So then from the buy side, how do you balance that power out so that you don't get into this situation where the sales engineer in that scenario was able to explain to this engineer, the buyer's engineer, well, you should do it this way, but without the full knowledge of the depth of this particular problem from the engineer side on the buy side, how do they avoid getting sold by the sales engineer team, et cetera, if inherently that team knows more?
Well, this is where the executive's supposed to come in and apply the why does this matter for my business? Not because the engineer doesn't actually know how the business runs. If you sit and talk to an engineer and go, how did your company make money? Most of them can't go any deeper than, well, we put this on a poster, right? Like we sell insurance. okay, but how does insurance actually make money? You know what I mean? Like they don't know anything more than what John Stewart or John Oliver said 2 weeks ago, assuming John Stewart or John Oliver covered that industry, right? And so that's a real shame because the truth is that's kind of what they're supposed to be serving. But they do understand, how does this company leverage technology like this? Right? So the executive is supposed to know, how do we make money, and how is this technology then going to help me make more money? Whether reduce cost, add efficiency, create a new line of business, whatever the technological imperative of that particular solution happens to be, right? How is this going to make me better? And that's actually where you start to pull apart the kind of sales process and expose that in reality it's not, right? In reality, this company is going around and just kind of cookie cutter selling all these things. And while they'll implement it, it won't actually solve anything because they don't understand the problem that they've solved well enough to really solve it. They just know how to talk about it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure there's yeah.
And a good sales team is like, no. Like here's specifically what we did. Here's how we've listened. Here's what we heard from your team. Like they run you through a whole like lineage project on how did we get here, to validate that both sides have heard and said the things necessary to be heard and said, that everything's represented in the room. And then they carry that forward and it becomes this continuation rather than a speed bump or an interruption with the executive.
Yeah, I mean that's sales 101. The issue I think is like, well, it's not sales 101, maybe 102. But
It's 104, man. It's
104. Yeah, we're a bit
The number
advanced
of
there.
sales
Yeah.
teams that come into my office and can carry that conversation, I could count. Like it's the reason I became an analyst. The reason I became an analyst was they're so bad at it. And I would spend my time with the sales teams going, like individually going, hey, like I realized that you came into my office and you said, Howard, we have this great presentation for you. And it's all at the executive level. And then it was speeds and feeds and speeds and feeds and speeds and feeds. And then you twisted it up on me and you did feeds and speeds. Like same conversation. You know what I mean? I don't care about speeds and feeds at all. I have an engineering team for that. Why do you think I would care about that? And then I would educate them on the things that I do care about and the approach that I would take were I in their shoes. So I came here to teach entire sales teams how to do it, because teaching one salesperson, one salesperson and sales engineer at a time does not scale. I thought that's what analysts did. It's not what analysts do. It's what we do, but it's not what analysts do, right? So I think the problem is endemic. I don't think we talk about it enough, and I think it creates an awful lot of like shelfware and missed opportunity and just inefficient kind of execution.
There's probably bigger issues here over the last 5-10 years where I feel like, given the market conditions and how easy it was to come across capital versus what it is now or prior to that period, there was also a lot of not very good salespeople. Like it bred a lot of not very good salespeople as well. And then they got into these habits, and now we've got people that have only sold in that environment where everybody's buying stuff. And so they haven't learned these skills of really tailoring this message to this person. So maybe this is actually a good opportunity for buyers, because there's so many bad salespeople out there to filter out and not get sold to so much. I do think there's another power imbalance here. When you talk about that, putting that presentation together, just time. Like as a buyer, it's not your job to buy software, unless you're in procurement. But most of the people that are involved in a buying decision aren't procurement. They're a portion of that decision. Whereas on the sales team, everybody that's on that sales team, the sales engineer, the salesperson, the VP sales, the marketers that are hitting that customer up with ads, like their job is 100% to close the deal. So, and there's another power imbalance in terms of time spent. So it's just, how do we level? This is where I worry that there's just never, salespeople are always going to be on the power side here, just in general, unless there's money going into the buying side somehow. How do we make sure? I mean, have you had mistakes where you've probably got examples where you've actually been sold right effectively by a good sales team and you regret it?
I mean, yeah, I could fill a book with just examples of, well, this didn't at all. Like I thought I did all my due diligence properly, and this didn't do at all what they said it was going to do.
Yeah,
and it happens constantly. Like it just happens over and over again. The good news is it doesn't happen the same way twice. Right? Like effectively, when that happens to me, what has happened is you've burned the relationship, and you didn't just burn it once, but you burned it forever. The sales team, right? When I am sold, effectively a fabrication to some degree, the net result is cool. I am done with you forever. You will never again sell to me, and anyone that ever asks me, I will say don't ever buy from that person. Some cases, don't ever buy from that company, depending on kind of what the net result is, right? Like
Yeah,
there
that's a
have
good one.
been ethical mistakes made by companies where the leadership reinforced the ethical mistake, and I just went, cool. So your whole company's off my list forever.
Who do you associate that with the most, and who do you blame the most? Like, is it the salesperson for selling a book of, whatever it is for a, I forget the term I'm looking for, but selling essentially not the product that they said they were, or is it the company for kind of pushing the sales? Because the salesperson really is a representative of the company. So I think
Yeah.
it's kind of challenging. Like, who do you cut off there? Do you cut off the salesperson, or do you cut off the company?
It depends, right? It really depends. It depends on so let's call that the day one. So it depends on day two, right? Does the salesperson mea culpa? Like, hey, I didn't realize it didn't do that. I now know that it didn't do that. Like, I'm gonna work with you to resolve it, right? Or does the salesperson suddenly develop wings and has flown away and is no longer reachable,
Yeah,
right? Does their leadership step in and take over? Is there an attempt to make it right? Right. The reality is you're not selling a product; you're selling trust.
interesting. Yeah.
So the second you betray that trust, it's now a question of clean it up, right? I have a real problem with like conference presentations that involve, especially at vendor conferences, that involve a customer case study, right? Because a case study should involve the good, the bad, and the ugly. It never involves anything but the good. Show me a customer that had good. Show me the same customer that also had bad, and show me that they had ugly, and show me that you stuck with them the whole time.
Yeah.
Right? We
Yeah.
seem to have forgotten that old poem of two footprints in the sand, two sets of footprints in the sand thing. You know, it's a very 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 famous Christian thing. Like looking back on my life, God, I saw I walked, and most of the time there were two footprints. But when things got really dark, there was only one set of footprints, and God said those were the times when I carried you. Like
Oh, there you
that's how
go.
a partnership is supposed to work. And so often it's, oh, something went wrong. Okay, cool. Well, I gotta go. Like, oh, did you hear that? That's another call. Oh, I'm going through a tunnel. Going through it. I can't. You know what I mean? Like show me. Don't show me how everything went perfect with this implementation and the customer's super happy. Show me how everything didn't go well. You stuck with the customer. You made sure that it was right, and you sold the intent when it began, and you worked regardless of whose fault. You worked side by side to carry them through and make sure they got what they needed. That's success. Success isn't everything went great. That's easy. That's not success. Who cares about that?
That's a really great point. I was trying to rack my head around this. I forget who I was talking to recently about how, well, if you give some negative stuff in a case study, like, how do you even know that that's just a little taste of the negative? And then there's actually a layer behind that, and really they're fooling you by doing that. But that's an interesting way to do it, where you're still, I mean, as a vendor, you're still kind of promoting the company as a whole, saying the product had some flaws in it. And that's, I think, a big part that buyers often miss, is that you're not buying a product. It's not just the trust. You are buying trust, but you're also buying support and services from this organization to get
I'm
you
buying a
through it.
roadmap.
Just because they have a product that they use to deliver that function. Like, if I hire a builder, they often come with a bunch of tools. But ultimately, the builder's doing the job, and the ones that have loads more tools are generally faster and more efficient. But still, it's the service that I'm getting, and people forget that with technology, that when things go wrong, you need to have that support. I think it can be challenging, and I'll defend some salespeople. There are times when companies do not want the salesperson involved in the conversation. Like, they purposefully do not let the salesperson communicate
Oh,
after
for
the
sure.
deal, right? They say, okay, that's not your job. That's someone else's job. Get back to the next deal, close it, and move on. So I think that can be one of the things. I think a lot of people do wrap up the salesperson as the culprit in many of these cases, where ultimately they've got one thing they can sell. Not to say they're not. There's plenty of salespeople that also like push things over in Konya, but some of them I think are a victim of poor company management more than they
Oh, for
are
sure.
themselves.
Yeah, but let's address that one here for a second. So any company that says the salesperson's job ends when the sale is made with that customer is a broken company. People buy from people. Corporations are not people. Therefore, if you remove the person that I establish a relationship with post sale, what you tell me is you don't actually care about me as a customer.
Okay.
That's 100% of what you've told me, because you've removed the one person that I built a relationship with from the relationship. So you don't value the relationship by doing that.
How many of your vendors actually have the same person that sold you the product be like ongoing within the relationship as a customer success?
Most of them.
Oh yeah,
You're
well,
going
that's
to,
cool.
because you're going to sell me again at the renewal, right? It's bad sales teams that just vanish into smoke. Most of them, especially the bigger the dollar amount is, or the higher the percentage of my total budget this sale captures, they maintain an ongoing relationship. They may not maintain a sale, but they maintain an ongoing relationship. Hey man, how is that working? Because they know in 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, 60 months, they're coming back to get me to do it again. And the more they maintain that relationship, the easier it's going to be to get me to just say yes again. Like renewals shouldn't be an overwhelming amount of effort. When they're an overwhelming amount of effort, it's generally because the salesperson got disconnected. Even when things go wrong, right? Like the salesperson just circling back and go, "Hey, I just want to make sure that we nailed everything, that you're happy, that we supported your team well. If not, I'll go straighten out what I can straighten out, and I'll come back to you, and I'll give you the after action, and I'll tell you what happened on our side." And you know what I mean? Like the more they maintain that, the easier it then is. Yeah, okay. Like sure, we had our ups and downs, but you guys always supported us, so sure, I'll sign up for another year. No problem. I'll just sign right here. Right? Versus the you failed miserably, and I'm not interested. Right? I'm buying a roadmap. I'm not buying something for today. I'm buying it for the length of the contract and preferably renewal after that, right? When I
Yeah.
sit down and look at stuff, I don't even care if it's a month, like a SaaS thing that I pay monthly. I'm ideally looking at it for 3 years. I don't want to make the decision twice. I've got a limited amount of time. To your point, you may only have one thing to sell. I have 9,500 things to buy. So I
Yeah.
don't want to revisit that decision every month, every 6 months, or every year. I don't want to revisit it for 3 years.
That's good. I mean, that's a big positive for a lot of vendors. I think the buyers are thinking one data point, but buyers are thinking long term about this as well, right? So because the vendor ultimately wants that too. Like realistically, let's take sales out of it, let's take everything out of it, and just look at this as a product company. The company wants a long term engagement. The salesperson wants a long term engagement. It's good that the buyer wants that as well. And I think there's so many areas of this where buyers want the same thing that salespeople want ultimately, but we have this sort of gate up because there's so many scars from both sides, right? Where the buyer has been, scorned by some poor decision that they made, and some salesperson kind of pushed them over the edge, and they've been burnt by that, and they don't want to remember that. And then the salesperson, on the other hand, has been ghosted on deals that they've committed, where it's been absolutely locked in, and then the person's just disappeared or gone with a competitor or something else happened. So we have this barrier up. Getting that barrier down, I mean, it's hard because there's so many people courting the buyer at the same time. I think that's what one of the challenges. But getting that barrier down, we are really looking at the same thing. We both want long-term partnerships and want to succeed. Just aligning them seems so difficult in that sales process, especially with a 6 to 9 month sales cycle, right? That's where a lot of these barriers come up, I think. Okay.
I mean, I tend to agree with you, right? But let's let's flip it back to the buyer, right? Let's say I'm the CIO of Disney Corp, right?
New job.
I have a $3.6 billion budget that I'm responsible for. That's the tech spend of Disney, right? A rough estimate. I'm just using statistical averages based on their global annual revenue. So I don't have insider knowledge. Just to be clear, I'm just guessing. But effectively, 3 to 4%. Disney's pretty tech forward, so it should be about 4% of global turnover is the IT budget. Cool. So that gives me $3.6 billion in a budget. right? You make a huge sale, it's $25 million. How many $25 million deals do I have to process to spend $3.6 billion? And I have to spend $3.6 billion, not 3.5, not 3.3.
Lots.
Right? So again, while that may be super strategic, super important for you and your company and your organization, for me, it's Tuesday between 9 and 11 a.m.
Yeah.
And then I can't revisit it. I don't want to hear it brought up again in any way at all, other than we love it at the 2.5-year mark. So sign at the 3-year mark.
Right? Yeah. No, I mean, look, it does. It's actually more like it's more important for the buyer to make this, to get this decision right. I mean, it is promising. I think that the long-term vision of that, I love that, and it makes a lot of sense. I wanted just to quickly flip because we have to cut off in a minute, but I wanted to ask you a question that's burning, and it's kind of related to what we're talking about. How do you feel about CSMs? And how do you feel about CSMs and CSM QBRs particularly? But just in general, I'd love to get your experience. You know, we've talked
Like
about
client
salesperson.
success management, CSM means 40 different things. So help me out.
Okay, yeah, like a customer success manager or client success, whatever. The person that takes over often from a salesperson to manage the account, and they'll deliver the QBRs, et cetera, et cetera. We talked about how the salesperson managing that relationship ongoing is important to make sure that you have that continuity. But how does the CSM role impact that? And how much value do you find in these QBRs? I'm kind of leaning towards some of them might be set up to sell you some more products, but just how do you feel generally about the customer success role? And what can they do to be better for you?
I mean, so CSM is like HR. Their job is to protect the company. Like that's their job.
Yeah.
Right? The salesperson's job is to protect their commission.
Sure.
Right? I'm just speaking of like motivation. I'm not ascribing
Yes.
I'm not ascribing good or bad will. That's not at all what I'm doing. Right? But the fact is, the salesperson's job is to protect that commission. The CSM's job is to protect the company. So it's a very different relationship and should be a very different relationship. Right? They're somewhat in opposition and in good organizations, and that's for the betterment of everyone. Right? A CSM really should concentrate on, are the company's internal processes created in a way that allows for this to be efficient, effective, and have a satisfied customer at the end of it. They actually shouldn't be concerned with whether I'm satisfied. They should be concerned with whether their processes, their people, their training, their systems, their products are aligned to make me happy, which is distinctly not the same thing. A salesperson should actually be concerned if I'm happy. Does that make sense?
Kind of. I mean, if you're happy, you're going to buy the thing.
Correct. But if I'm happy with the salesperson, I'm going to buy. If I'm happy with the company, then things probably work well. But there's a difference in the machinery, right? I want a CSM to take my feedback and alter the machinery of the company to make it smooth, assuming they're hearing similar feedback from others. I don't expect that from a salesperson. Like, it's ridiculous to expect that. A salesperson can kick someone to get them to take action that they weren't taking. A CSM should never kick someone to take action that they're not taking. They should work to fix a long-term problem. And I don't know that companies actually enable that and balance that relation. I don't even know that companies think about that relationship rather than think about a handoff of roles.
I mean, you're almost saying that the CSM is more responsible for the brand of the business and more
100%.
a representative of the brand of the business
100%.
than the salesperson is.
100%.
I
I expect salespeople to be mercenaries. I don't expect that from a CSM. It's actually a bigger problem. Like if my salesperson leaves and goes to another company, I'm going to assume the comp package is better at the new company. That's all I'm going to assume, because I've worked with salespeople, and that's kind of what happens, right? Especially like okay, I've worked my network. My network has bought all of this stuff I have to sell. I'm going to go to another company so I can work my network and sell them to all the stuff I have to sell, right? Like again, they're paid on commission, so I'm just going to I've worked with them before. I'm going to assume that's how they're motivated. Customer success is not that. And so it would actually bother me a whole lot more to find there's a high matriculation in customer success, because that tells me they're just a mouthpiece, but they have no ability to impact improvement. And so they're just wasting their time trying to manage customer expectations against a constantly sliding scale that they don't see an improvement in. I don't see that in salespeople, but I do see it in a CSM, right? So from the buyer side, I look at that distinctly different. I've had 3 CSMs in the last 12 months. I'm not renewing this contract. Like, I may tell you that I will because I need it to be supported for the length of the contract, but I'm not going to renew this contract. It's not going to happen.
Okay, that's really interesting. CSM churn, a really key metric for the health of the underlying business.
Yeah, for sure.
That's cool. That's really interesting. All right, we're going to have to wrap it up in a second. So you buy a lot of tech. You evaluate a lot of tech. Anything exciting you think that's up and coming that isn't complete garbage and nonsense like those naughties things you bought and this AI thing that everyone's bloody talking about? Is there anything else that you see that's actually potentially a big game changer in the next 12 months that people should start thinking about and evaluating?
I think we need to pay close attention to those things that can help evolve our operating model. Right? Our operating model really hasn't changed since the noughties, which is part of what makes it naughty in a cloud focused world, because the cloud operates totally differently, even though we want to pretend that it doesn't. And so if we think about what those things are, hyper automation is one that I think is really interesting and really special and has the ability to be truly transformative. Identity management. We really need to think about identity different. And so you should be spending time trying to figure out what is identity supposed to mean for your organization and reconcile that against what it actually means today, like how you implement identity. And does that fit in a cloud first world? Does that fit in a fully distributed world? Does that fit into a world where you can no longer have moats and walls protecting your organization? And then, I would look at things that can help with some of the difficult process improvement. Procurement sucks, right? So if you can look at how do I reconcile and resolve some of my procurement challenges, that would be another place that I would spend a little bit of time. Right? How do I find ways to level the playing field without my people having to do tremendous amounts of research? Right? And how do I do that in a way that allows for the right level of democratization, the right level of communal decision making, while at the same time recognizing ultimately a decision has to be made. And since I'm going to make the same decision in 3 years, how do I also make sure I don't lose all that knowledge?
Very good point. I think we're going to close it up there. I wanted to ask you more about identity management. Like, maybe I'll just throw you one more because I'm interested. What's missing with identity management? I thought we'd done that years ago. Is it not fixed? What's the gap?
No, it's not remotely fixed.
What's wrong with it?
Everything is wrong with it. We like the way this thing started. We kind of treated it as though this was not a thing that would be attacked, I guess you could say, right? So we created 92,000 service accounts with unexpiring passwords. Like, okay. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
We've said you're you regardless, just based on a username and a password, and cool. We've added 2-factor authentication, but are you in China? Do you go to China? Have you ever been to China? Like, you might, but everybody in the company, you know what I mean? Like identity management needs a level of granularity, needs to follow zero trust principles, and can be a tremendously huge blast radius. I mean, there's currently a flaw that was found in Active Directory that if you create a group called ESX admins, they instantly get admin rights to your ESX servers if ESX is integrated into Active Directory. So if I have users that can create groups, and that's a far larger group than domain admins, just for the record, right? Then all of a sudden, my ESX servers, the things that run the business, can now be compromised by an attacker. Do I even know who those people are? What controls do I have in place, right? The MGM hack occurred because the help desk reset a password and read it to someone that wasn't that person. Like, identity management is so core to how we need to operate our business and our networks and how we provide security. And yet I would say it's fundamentally broken. Like, we haven't actually thought about identity as anything other than you, Chris, have an identity. But everything has an identity. A service has an identity. A server has an identity. Like, everything, an API, right? So like, an identity is something that is very human, right? That we created a digital analog to, that we never thought about what happens when that digital analog is more than just representative of a human, and we never really fixed it.
Oh, wow. All right. It is a problem. And it sounds like, yeah, all right, I agree with you. And just don't cut the power cord. This is like the modern day equivalent of cutting the power cord
Right.
that happened.
Right.
Right. Let's just not do that. MGM did that. I guess someone, I don't know what happened at CrowdStrike, something weird, but not this. But
It's a different podcast. We could definitely talk about that in another podcast if you want.
Let's do that on another one. It sounds like most of the podcasts I've done, I'm scared of the future. It sounds like our identity now is at threat. So I was talking about AI before, now identity management. Okay. Thanks for scaring me in a whole nother way, Howard. This has been great. And I'll speak to you soon, mate.
Cool. It's great.
Cheers, buddy.